So you've splashed out on a new espresso machine and you're expecting that all of your coffees will taste amazing from now on. So you set everything up and you pull a shot, but it tastes like rusty metal with a tablespoon of lemon juice. What the hell? Why doesn't it taste like dark chocolate and sweet caramel? Making a great espresso can be mystifying and it takes a little bit of knowledge. And that's why in this video, I'm going to show you how to use your home espresso machine to get amazing, delicious and bright tasting espresso shots. This guide should work no matter what espresso machine you have at home. Some machines are obviously better than others and have different functions, but if you follow these steps, you'll get the best espresso shot you can with the equipment you have. My first machine, the Breville Barista Express, had a built-in pressure gauge, but the machines I've been using recently, like the Gaggia Classic and the Rancilio Silvia, don't have that. But this one does have a PID, which means I can control temperature. Pay attention to the things that you can control and don't get hung up on the things that you can't. This video will only talk about espresso. I'm planning on doing a whole video series on milk steaming and latte art, so if you want to see those when they drop, you should consider subscribing. The most important thing in getting a great espresso is, of course, the coffee beans. Sourcing them and finding good coffee beans is top priority. Here's what you want to look out for. The ideal window of coffee beans for espresso is between 4 days and 2 to 3 weeks after roasting. This depends on the bean, but you should avoid buying coffee beans in bulk and instead buy smaller amounts little by little as you use them to maintain freshness. You can usually tell if the coffee beans are old by pulling a shot, and you'll see that the crema disappears quickly because most of the gas has already been released from the bean over time. Our golden rule is to only buy coffee beans that have a roasted on date rather than an expiry date or a sell-by date. You won't find good coffee beans for espresso in your supermarket. So I recommend going to a local cafe where you like the coffee beans and buy beans directly from them. If you're in the UK, you can order fresh coffee directly from us if you click the link in the description below. Roast level is incredibly important to the flavor of the coffee. You might prefer a light roast or you might prefer a dark roast coffee. Darker roasts tend to get a richer, more chocolatey flavor than light roast coffee. Light roasts tend to have a lot more interesting, subtle flavors, but they can also be incredibly difficult to dial in well. Different roasts will typically require different grinder settings, with darker roasts being on a coarser setting and lighter roasts requiring a finer grind size. Beans grown in different places and with different varieties will have different flavors. Go with what you like and try lots of different kinds of coffee. Don't just pick coffee beans from a particular country, because 2 different farms in Ethiopia, for example, might have very different processing methods and growing methods, so the beans will taste very different in the end. Where possible, cafes might tell you not only the country of origin, but also the altitude and even the farmer's name who grew the coffee beans. If you find information like processing methods or altitude on the coffee packet, that's at least a sign that the cafe cares about where their coffee is coming from. It doesn't necessarily guarantee a good flavor, but it at least shows that they care. One of the easiest variables to get down is the dose. The best thing to do for this is to find out what is the recommended dose for the filter basket that you're using. My Rancilio Silvia's double filter basket takes about 15 grams of coffee, but the Gaggia Classic takes about 18. You should be able to find out the recommended dose for the filter baskets online on the manufacturer's website, or if you bought a third-party filter basket like I did, then it will usually tell you on the packaging that comes with it. What you want to do is get as much coffee in the basket as possible before you see an imprint of the shower screen on the coffee puck after you've pulled a shot. It's very hard to dial in a coffee machine without getting a scale to weigh the doses it's going in every time. A good set of coffee scales that weighs to 0.1 of a gram will come in handy, so I'll put a link to one of those in the description below as well. A note here is that you shouldn't adjust the dose to change your shot timings. If the espresso is coming out too slowly, then you should be adjusting the grind, not the dose. You should only change the dose to make more or less espresso and use a single, double, or triple filter basket depending on how much coffee you want to make. It's as simple as that. Once you have the dose right, let's get a consistent tamp pressure. Tamping compresses the puck and creates resistance for the water to push through. What you're really looking for, no matter what tool you're using, is even and consistent pressure when tamping. Some people put their portafilter on a bathroom scale and push down to get about 30 pounds of pressure, but I think this is unnecessary. You should really just be looking for consistency here. That's one of the reasons why I use a distribution tool. I'm surprised that there hasn't been more buzz about distribution tools as an alternative to tamping, because I found it much easier to get consistent shots when only using my distribution tool. We did a full video on that, which you can watch by clicking the link up here right now. The grind is by far the most important variable in dialing in an espresso shot. At the most basic level, simply put, if your coffee is coming out too quickly, then you should dial finer, and if your coffee is coming out too slowly, then you should dial coarser. When I have a new coffee, I start at a grind setting that looks a little bit finer than table salt, and then I try pulling a shot. If the coffee comes out too fast, I reassess what's going on. Now it could be that the grind needs to go finer, but it could also be the distribution or the dose. It might be that I need to grind finer, but it could also be my tamping pressure or other variables that I haven't paid enough attention to. The distribution can also be a factor, especially if you notice blonding, where the coffee becomes a lighter brown, or swirly tailing, which is where your mouse tail starts to twist and turn, which indicates a low amount of coffee solubles in the extraction. This is where having a bottomless portafilter really comes in handy for diagnosing shots. If the coffee comes out of the spout looking a little bit too blonde too early, you might think you need to change the grind, but it could also be channeling. A bottomless portafilter will show you this, where it wouldn't be apparent just coming out of the spout. However, even without this tool, you can still diagnose your shots by weighing the espresso shot as it comes out and seeing how long it takes to get to the desired weight. Take note, unless you have a zero retention grinder, you should purge a few grams of coffee every time you change the settings. Most grinders will retain some of the grinds from previous settings, so this could affect the flavor. Many people work with an empty hopper and only put in the correct weight of beans they need per cycle. Unless there's something wrong with your grinder, putting 18 grams in should equal 18 grams out. The standard device is to get your 2:1 ratio of espresso out in 25 to 30 seconds. That would be a standard espresso, so if you put 18 grams of coffee in, you should be getting 36 grams of coffee out. Some home espresso machines have timings programmable, so you can just press the button, leave it to go, and it will cut the shot at the right time. Most semi-automatic home machines don't have this feature, except for the Barista Express, so you'll want to watch and cut the flow when you reach the right amount of weight in the cup. If your machine lets you control this setting, temperature has a really important impact on flavor. Your temperature should be somewhere in the range of 91 to 96 degrees Celsius. Once the water gets too hot and goes over boiling temperature, you run the risk of scalding the coffee beans, which is some of the worst tasting coffee I've ever had. This is one of the reasons why I always brew the coffee first and steam the milk later. As a general rule, the denser the coffee bean, the higher the temperature you'll need to extract the bean fully. This is where knowing the altitude that the coffee bean was grown at can be helpful, because the higher the altitude, the more dense the beans are likely to be. Also, lighter roast coffee tends to do better with higher temperatures as well. The Barista Express can move this temperature up or down by 2 degrees, but if you don't have that machine, then you'll need a PID temperature monitor to change the temperature on your machine. If you don't have control over temperature, or you don't want to play around too much with it, a temperature of about 93 or 94 degrees C is perfect for most espressos. If you don't have a temperature controller, then I highly recommend that you purge some water through the group head before brewing your espresso. Some entry-level machines overheat the water a little bit, so purging some of the water through the group head until there's no more steam coming out can help guarantee that you're not going to burn the coffee. If your machine doesn't have a pressure valve, then you won't have much control over this from shot to shot. If you do have a pressure gauge, then you'll be looking for about 9 bar of pressure. If the pressure is too high, you might have ground the coffee too finely or overfilled the portafilter basket. But if it's too low, you might need to grind a little bit finer. Some newer machines, like the decent DE1 Plus, have control over the flow rate. This is pretty advanced, and I haven't had much time with the decent DE1 Plus yet, but I hope to get more time with one in the future so I can make a video about flow rates. Pre-infusion wets the coffee puck before brewing so you can get a consistent extraction. Some machines do this automatically, like the Breville Barista Express, but even if you have a manual machine like this one, you can turn on the group head for 1 second, turn it off for 5 to let the coffee puck wet, and then you can turn it back on again to do your normal brewing cycle. Even if you get everything right and you have a beautiful looking shot, it can still taste awful. If you don't get a palatable flavor, then some of your variables might be out of whack, or the coffee might just be bad coffee. In general, bitterness is due to over-extraction. The shot is coming out too slowly and the grind needs to be coarser to extract the coffee solubles properly. Sourness comes from under-extraction, so you'll need to grind finer to extract more solubles. As I mentioned before, lighter roasts are a lot harder to dial in, and you might find that your coffee tends to be more sour, which means it's over-extracted and you'll need to grind a little bit finer for lighter roast coffee. Now, this is where controlling the grind and the dose in proportion is important. If the coffee tastes sour and you need to grind finer, but you already have a good shot timing and weight, then you might need to reduce the dose so that you can get a better shot timing. Remember, if you change the dose, you should change the weight that you're looking to get from the extraction. So if you go from 18 grams to 17 grams, then you should take your final weight of coffee from 36 grams to 34 grams. It can be really hard to get this part right, and you will end up wasting some coffee as you get bad shots while you're trying to get something drinkable as espresso. If you want to know what each part of the extraction tastes like, then you can try this. I line up 6 cups and change them every 5 seconds, and then try the coffee step by step. Usually the second and third steps taste the best, and the final steps taste watery. It might be handy to take some notes on what you're doing with your espresso. Your settings for a lighter roast that you've done in the past might be useful after using different kinds of coffee. And there we have it. I really hope that this video has helped you to get better tasting espresso. If this video has helped you, please leave a like and share it with your coffee addicted friends. See you next time. Pay attention to the things that you can control and don't get hung up on the things that you can't. It's like life lessons here. Oh, that's horrible. Ugh.